WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by JW Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. The name of the show is We Should Know. I'm your host, JW Simmons. Our guest today is Dr. Alex Huff. Dr. Huff, thank you for being with us.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having me.
A lot of people know you. You've been around in the area, graduated and from medical school at East Carolina, came to Clinton. The story I recall you telling me one time in the past when you were on, one of the reasons you ended up here was because of our mayor, Lou Starling.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a quick little funny story, but my mother needed some legal work, and she went to a legal office in Smithfield, walked in and asked for the lawyer on call, and they set her up with Mr. Lou Starling, and she happened to mention to him that her son was an orthopedic surgeon in Florida and was looking to move to North Carolina, and so Lou said, let me have his number, and gave me a call, and the rest is history. And what's funny is my mother called me to tell me that I was going to get a call from the mayor of Clinton, and she said, he's the nicest boy. He reminds me of Opie Taylor. And she was talking about Lou. Yeah. So Lou and I have gone back and forth over that for years, but he's been a great friend of mine, a great help, and just a great person for the city of Clinton.
Well, knowing Mayor Starling, he'll take that as a great compliment, I'm sure. So we're using his name in a very positive impact this morning. I want to mention that since 1998, I believe.
Yes.
And I look at that and think about the speed of time. You know, you've been a key asset for this show and supported this show for many years. You've been a huge part of the community, and you've grown a medical profession as a surgeon, but a lot of folks probably might not realize, unless they've been there, you're also one of a few people that's certified in sports medicine.
Yes. Yes. So I've got board certification in both orthopedic surgery and in orthopedic sports medicine, and that just required a little extra training and some extra testing, but it allows me to get more involved if I can with high school athletics and of course the weekend warriors like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that the big thing for folks to understand is the importance, at least for me and a lot of people, of having somebody like you in a rural community. It's becoming extremely hard to attract professionals with your degree classification, top U class, to go to a rural community and live. What's the difference between Alex Huff being here and deciding to be in Clinton? And what would you say to other people? What are they missing?
Well, I tell you, the data says that only 2% of board certified orthopedic surgeons practice in a community of less than 100,000 people. Mm-hmm. And so most orthopedic surgeons are in larger metropolitan areas. I had been in those areas, but I also had some taste of Eastern North Carolina. I wanted to be in a rural community, and some of my mentors told me, said, if you build it, they'll come, and I found that to be true. And I've got friends, in fact, I spoke with a friend in Tampa, Florida last week. He's a team physician for the Yankees and the Buccaneers, and he's in Tampa, and he says, well, how do you make it in Clinton? I Googled it. There's only 9,000 people that live there. I said, well, Dan, I said, these people come from all over. I said, we've been very fortunate, and if you treat people right and you let them know that you're trying to help them, I think that a drive is not much to them. But I tell these other people, in fact, I'll begin recruiting. I've got to start finding some help, as I start thinking about the next phase of my life. And we'll bring someone here that also is committed to the community. And there's several options out there for me. I've got a friend right now that is from Wallace, went to NC State, and Campbell. He's out in Oklahoma City, and I'm communicating with him right now. And but someone like that would be just a wonderful asset for this community.
It's been a while since we've had you in the studio and you've had time to come in and sit down and just have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I want to open by saying thank you for doing that and taking time. But one of the things I always want to kind of look at is the past 12 to 15 months with this thing we've called a pandemic, right, with all this kind of thing. How has it impacted the business of being an orthopedic surgeon and serving the community and dealing with all of these kinds of things? We've talked a lot about restaurants and other places that's had problems, but it's also impacted the private practice medicine as well.
Well, like any other small business, you worry about your payroll. You know, we've got 15, 16, 17 employees and that we've kept, and we didn't have to lose any of them during the pandemic. We were closed down for that 6-week period of time. I couldn't do any elective surgery. And you find ways around that by taking call at the hospital because there was a shortage of physicians, and so did some extra work there. But it's been tough, but I've been very fortunate to be able to get through this. I've had a lot of dedicated and loyal patients that were ready and willing and needing to come back as soon as that was lifted. Unfortunately, but fortunately maybe for my business, is the accidents continued to occur. And so the hip fractures, the broken wrists, the broken ankles, the knees sprains and things like that, people continued to hurt themselves during the pandemic, and those people needed care. And I was fortunate to be working at a hospital that was suited and supportive in us being able to do that safely. And I was amazed at how safe we were able to keep our staff, both at the hospital and in my office, through this pandemic.
Well, I think one of the things that strikes me too is, as we have this conversation about the hospital, and your office is located directly across the street on Beaman Street from Sampson Regional Medical Center, and Dr. Sean Howard is the CEO, and of course a medical doctor, which I've said to him before is just an unusual mix. Normally you don't see that.
Yeah, sure.
But you've been a huge asset as a surgeon to be there for those emergency cases that roll into that ER.
Yeah, it's been great. You know, and you asked me about friends of mine in larger metropolitan areas, and I tell them, I said, listen, I can park my car in front of my office and I can walk to the ER, walk to the operating room, walk to my office in 2 or 3 minutes. I don't have to worry about parking in a parking deck and walking a half mile into a huge major medical center, and so I can perform orthopedic surgery and have an orthopedic practice in a nice, small, compact area and do a really good job at it and provide a lot of service to a lot of people. I'm not hampered or impeded by a lot of the things that do slow you down in a bigger city.
And I think that's important for folks to understand in a conversation, and I think we might have mentioned this sometime in the past, but it's also important in the number of people, the demographics of having a huge number of people when you're going into an ER, when you're going into a hospital. And I thought about the pandemic in our conversation several years ago, and you mentioned, well, you just got, in larger areas, you just got more spread because you got more people, you got more contagions.
Exactly.
Whereas here, you don't necessarily have that many.
Correct. And that's a good thing about our hospital. I mean, if you look at our elective surgical infection rates and things like that, they're much lower than they are around the country, especially in the larger hospitals. And I think it's because, you know, like you said, we've got more geographic area, and the people just generally aren't as sick because when they get really sick, we're going to find them a tertiary care center to send them. So we don't have to worry about a lot of the bad illnesses and infections and things like that. But our hospital, and I'll go back to Dr. Howard, and he had it really set up for this pandemic. And from the protective equipment to the negative pressure, laminar flow, air conditioning systems and things like that, we were really at the cutting edge, from testing to, and then on to the vaccinations. The vaccination clinic has been great. And so I think that we've really been a wonderful example for how a small rural hospital community should be run. I can't find fault with anything that's happened during the whole pandemic. So
one of the things that interests me is we talk about medicine, and you mentioned this. I want to kind of follow that thread. Let's hope that you're still practicing surgery 30 years from now, but that's probably doubtful. but if you are, but you mentioned when you reach the point you know that you're going to be looking at that cessation process.
Sure.
With what's happened with the pandemic and looking at some of the data where folks in large urban areas now are looking at space, they're looking at land, they're looking at literally that countryside that is we know as being a wonderful place to live. Is that also going to have an impact on medicine for folks like you and Dr. Howerton and others, and even me that's looking for physicians to come here? Will that be a positive thing for us to attract people to a rural area that's less populated? I
think so. I mean, all you got to do is look at the data about the people leaving New York and leaving Chicago and leaving Los Angeles and moving to Texas and moving to other areas in the South. I think it's an attractive place. You've just got to find the person with the right mentality and that can see the bigger picture and see that it's a wonderful place to raise kids. It's a wonderful place to have a family. It's safer, and we're immune from so many of the things that you see. You turn on television any day. The first 3 stories are negative stories about what's happening all over the world, all over the country, and some within our own state. But I think that we're relatively immune from that thus far in Sampson County and in rural eastern North Carolina. And for that, I'm grateful,
And I think that impact is going to be a huge thing, especially if we get that message out. Mm-hmm. And with the relationship Sampson Regional has with Campbell Medical School
yes.
and others, I think sometimes I get an opportunity to talk to some of these folks that's coming mm-hmm. through in internships. And I recall a conversation with one young lady. I was a little bit disappointed. I asked her, was she going to remain in a rural area? And she told me she was going back to Pennsylvania.
Right,
and I said, well, I said, I'm heartbroken, but I think that,
right.
You do everything you kind of, I guess, to sell it.
Sure.
But the reality is, you guys that are in the profession, I think can do a better job than anybody in selling that.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do that. I think that, like I said, I think there's wonderful opportunities here in places like Clinton and some of our surrounding counties and smaller. I think a smaller town offers a better quality of life. Having said that, I just helping my daughter and her new husband move into a house in Raleigh, and the traffic there is terrible. And she's at medical school at Campbell. But I think she'll end up she even sees the attractiveness now of coming back to a place like Clinton.
I think that particular piece of it is going to be critical. Mm-hmm. I want to get into something that you mentioned to me that was going on in your relationship with Sampson Regional mm-hmm. in this something called a joint camp. And
yes.
As we kind of segue into that, I know we're coming up on a few seconds here before we're going to have to go to break, so I don't want to just dump that on you. I'll kind of let that be kind of the coming back thing. But
okay.
In just a few seconds, we're going to take a break. As we go to break, I would encourage people to kind of stay with us as we talk about that, and then we're going to get into some of the more realistic things that you look at on a daily basis mm-hmm. and some of the new technologies out there. So we'll take a break and we'll be back in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're talking with Dr. Alex Huff, an orthopedic surgeon right here in Clinton that does multiple duties to include ER work at the hospital. We'll be back in a moment. Call a friend. Stay tuned.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We should know it's on the air. I want to kind of encourage you as I open this segment to call a friend or a family member. Oftentimes, this is the kind of show that I get the commentary, oh, I wish I had known about it. Well, this is the show that you need to know about. It's Dr. Alex Huff. We're talking about orthopedic surgery. We're talking about things that, Dr. Huff, that I guess they like to hear from you.
Sure.
But it's about issues that really is affecting their lives and some things that, for lack of a better comment, would be prevention mm-hmm. measures mm-hmm. That you've seen with your patients. I want to kind of begin that process by talking about some things that you've done in conjunction with the hospital. Mm-hmm. There was a thing that I mentioned, I think, as we went to break, called Joint Camp.
Right.
Let's talk about that and some of the innovative things that's come out of this pandemic that you got involved in.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've always wanted to do at the hospital was start a educational seminar for patients that were undergoing elective joint replacement. For instance, if you were going to have a knee replacement or your loved one, your spouse, it'd be nice to be able to go to a class and get a lot of your questions answered, because even though they're often answered in the doctor's office, a lot of it we don't retain or we may forget to mention. There may be questions that you have that aren't answered. Mm-hmm. And this joint replacement seminar gives you a lot of information that you and your team member, your spouse or your family member can hear and have a lot of your questions answered, so that setting the expectations on the front end, you can reap the benefits on the back end. And by answering the questions on the front, there's less anxiety and problems on the back end. And so that's worked out really well. We're requiring everyone to go through that. And that's along with the pressure from the pandemic. When the pandemic was at its height, we were not able to do inpatient elective surgery. And so I was relegated only to emergency surgeries or outpatient surgeries. And to me, that became a good time to say, you need a knee replacement and you're healthy enough and I'm giving you enough education. I think we can do it as an outpatient. So we can do it. You can have your knee replacement at 7:30 in the morning and you can be home by 2 in the afternoon without spending any time in the hospital and not having to take up a bed that may be utilized by someone that needs it because of the pandemic, or not risk being exposed to COVID in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So it worked out well. And so we did about a dozen outpatients. And so now we've got about 2/3 of the patients that have knee replacement are being done on a same-day surgery basis, an outpatient basis, which has worked out great. And that's something that was really brought about because of the pandemic.
Well, Dr. Huff, do you see that kind of thing going on in the future, even after the pandemic is behind us, and hopefully we're getting to that point now? Is that something that will continue to go on, that kind of process that
I
allows
think so.
folks to go home afterwards, if you pick the patients that can do that?
Correct. You've got to get the patients prepared on the front end. And, I always tell my patients, I said, listen, now you're not sick. You just need a resurfacing. You need a joint replacement, but you're not sick. And the hospital's for sick people. So we're going to bring you in, perform your surgery, provide you with the pain support that you need, and be able to get you back home. What we're doing, there's new innovative anesthesia techniques that can provide some post-operative pain relief that otherwise was not available, and now it is. We're going to provide you with home health and home physical therapy that starts the day of your discharge. We're also providing patients with a home exercise device, basically an exercise bicycle, if you will, that's got computer programs and Wi-Fi capability so that I can see how much you're using it, what your progress is, what your range. For instance, for a knee replacement, you're on your bike, 20 minutes twice a day, and I can see what your motion is. I can see how your knee is doing, and that data is stored on that device and then accessible to me through my electronic health record through the internet, which is great. So these kinds of things just weren't available in the past.
And that's important too, in the sense that, and I was going to try to get to this observation, is that oftentimes you as the doctor, as a surgeon, have the prescription for things that folks need to do. And part of that recovery is physical therapy and those kinds of things. But if people don't follow that, then they come back and go, well, I'm just can't walk, I'm stiff, I got pain. And they didn't follow the prescription, then it kind of comes full circle, and you're kind of blamed for not doing something.
Right.
So this is truly a 2-part series. They've got to do their job.
Correct. And I have access to that data. I know it's not just me asking you if you did it, it's actually me having access to the data that shows me that you did it. And you hear a lot about the virtual visits now with the doctor's office. So this was born out of the pandemic as well, because physical therapists didn't want to go into your home, or maybe it wasn't safe for them to go into your home, both for the patient or the therapist. And so virtual therapy visits, when you have a remote device like this exercise, I call it a bicycle, but it's not really a bicycle, but an exercise device that can measure your range of motion, measure your strength, and not only that, it can record the amount of time that you're using it. It can record your vital signs while you're using it, so your heart rate, blood pressure, all those kinds of things. That data can be stored, electronically sent to me. I can see it in real time, so I know exactly what you're doing. And if I don't think you're meeting criteria, we can have a phone call or an inpatient visit or an outpatient visit to discuss those things.
Does that reduce the expense also, in the sense that you don't have that person that either goes to the house or as you just mentioned, feels like it's necessary to be there? You can actually look at it through technology and do the same thing. Does that reduce the expense, and can that technology be used after that patient is through with it?
Absolutely. The answer to both of those questions is yes. When you think about when I first came to Clinton and we were doing knee replacements, these patients were coming in on Monday and going home on Friday, staying 5 days in the hospital. We reduced that down to 4, 3, 2, and now to basically 0 for some patients, which has been great. So you talk about a tremendous cost savings, both for the patient and for the healthcare system in general.
How long should somebody put off this idea of joint pain, of whether it's hip, knee, shoulder, all of this kind of thing. How long should you put it off before you literally just say, and I guess the obvious question will be when the pain hurts bad enough, you'll go somewhere. But oftentimes, especially with the pandemic, folks didn't want to get out because they didn't want to be exposed. Then number two, they're thinking, well, maybe if I just wait another month or two, or maybe if I try this latest potion that come on TV, are you doing irreparable damage by waiting, I guess is the question.
Well, the answer to that question would be, if you're losing, for instance, your knee, if you're losing motion in your knee, if you can't get it straight and if you can't bend it anymore, the longer you go without putting a joint through a full range of motion, the less likely it is to ever go through a full range of motion. You think about a car, it may need a tune-up, it may need some transmission work, some new spark plugs or something like that, but you can still drive it. But if you leave it sitting in a field for 3 years and don't drive it, you can get it, you're not going to be driving it anywhere, and it's a major overhaul. So it's much easier to fix a smaller problem. To answer your question, I tell patients, if you wake up at night with pain, if your friends plan activities and you don't go with them because you don't feel like walking because your knees hurt too bad, and if you're losing motion, okay, if your knees become the number one thing every day you think about, then it's time to get them evaluated. Of course, they don't always have to be replaced. We just talked about it. There's a lot of newer technologies that are available now that weren't even available a year ago that we're involved with. And
I want to get into some of those. When we talk about the knee replacement, we talk about the pain. Is that something that is just a longevity issue, or are there things that we can do to help prevent that as we go through life? And again, I guess I'm trying to get around to the question that is utilization an issue, or is it how we utilize our joints as far as flexibility, mobility, and that kind of thing?
Well, people, in simple terms, people inherit the quality of their cartilage, and the cartilage can be hard or soft. And some people inherit soft cartilage, and it's like a soft sports racing tire. It may have, it's going to wear out faster, okay? It's going to wear out faster. Some people inherit hard cartilage, like a hard truck tire. That tire lasts longer. And that's an inherited quality. It's much like your teeth, I think. Some people brush their teeth every day, go to the dentist all the time, and they still unfortunately lose their teeth. Other people really don't take much care of their teeth, but yet you'll see them when they're really old and they've got all their teeth. Yeah. It's an inherited quality. So, but your knees wear out with time, but it's not necessarily, for instance, running is not necessarily, there's no study that shows that running is bad for your knee. People that run have inherited quality cartilage, and so they're able to do it. Nolan Ryan could pitch a fastball when he was 42 years old. Alex Huff could never throw a fastball. Right. So we all inherit different genetic qualities but when the joints wear out, when they get stiff, painful, and you can't sleep because of the pain, and you're limiting your activities because of the pain, then it's time to see somebody.
So it does have a genetic lineage. I mean, you could look at family members and so forth and kind of do that geno thing and say, okay, these are some of the problems with this gene, and it might be a cardiovascular issue, but it's not a knee issue.
Yeah, it's like heart disease or anything else. If a person has heart disease, chances are either their mother or father did too. And same thing with knee replacements. A lot of the patients I see that have knee replacements, they'll tell me, or I'll ask them, yeah, my mother had a knee replacement too, things like that.
Well, so the best move, I guess I'm hearing you saying, if there is any question, they can simply call you, make an appointment, come in, you can do an assessment, and just lay it out and give them a real sense of where they are in this process.
And it doesn't mean they need surgery. The fact is that I only operate on about 10% of the patients that come into the office. And so a lot of people say, I don't want to go see the orthopedic surgeon because I'm going to get surgery. It's not like going to Pizza Hut where you get pizza. I mean, there's other things on the menu. And so you can come to see us, and only about 10% of the people actually are going to be scheduled for surgery. So we may see 50 people a day and schedule 5 for surgery. But then the other 45 are getting other non-operative treatments that are available to us.
I think you just nailed it, because a lot of people, I think, put it off because they know, well, if I go, I'm going to have knee surgery automatically. So therefore they push it back and decide, well, I don't want to engage in that, and sometimes wait a little too long. So what I'd like to do is maybe talk about that a bit more, and then when we come back from this break, get into some of those new things that has occurred in the past 2 or 3 years that maybe you can let people know and that you're engaged in now to help them. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Call a friend. Stay tuned.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us. JW Simmons, I'm your host. The name of the show is We Should Know. We're talking about orthopedic stuff. We're talking with Dr. Alex Huff. You've heard the name. He may be your doctor. Thousands and thousands of patients. Dr. Huff, thank you for being with us. We're going to, I want to kind of we're midway the show, we'll kind of open this with, let folks know we're not going to touch on everything. But we're hitting some high spots of what you see on a daily basis. Of what folks may not realize is going on in the background. And one of those is some of these new innovations that's come out. It's, as we talked about earlier, it's been some time since we sat down and had a conversation, but some of the new things, quite frankly, is just amazing. And it cuts down even more on that invasive kind of procedure that you have to do. What are some of those, and kind of give us a sense of how they evolved and what you see in the future?
Right. Well, one of the most common things I see is knee pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, things like that. And so the treatments available for that have been obviously medications, anti-inflammatory medications, both steroid and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications. But most people, by the time they see me, have already had that prescribed by their primary care physician. They'll get referred to me, and of course, the injections are safe ways to treat joints. Injections have come a long way. They're not the big painful needle that people talk about. People are amazed when we give them injections. They're like, "You've already done it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, that's not what I remember." Well, times have changed, and so techniques are better now for how the injections are performed. Cortisone is kind of the mainstay, the old workhorse, and cortisone has its advantages and disadvantages too, though. Cortisone can raise blood sugar in diabetic people. Too much cortisone is not good for the body. We're very careful to limit that, and we monitor that and measure that specifically to make sure that we're not doing anything that's harmful. We're just trying to help people. But out of the pressure to find other types of injectable materials, and also looking at the way tissues heal, scientists have found some other things. One of those, the first one that came out, was hyaluronate. Most of the women now have heard of that because it's in the makeup, a lot of the wrinkle creams and things like that. Hyaluronic is used as in plastic surgery as fillers and things like that. But hyaluronic originally was derived, the fluid, from a rooster comb, is found to be very viscoelastic and holds moisture and holds water very well. And so eye surgeons have used it to replace the fluid that's within the eyeball. Orthopedic surgeons have used it to replace the cartilage that's in our joints. And so that was the first of those medications. And it's kind of run through phases, and where insurance would cover it for a while, then reject it for a while, things like that. And that's always been a hassle, but it's pretty much covered now by most commercial insurances and Medicare. And it works pretty well. It's a mechanical cushion that works in the knee. But that doesn't treat the inflammatory condition, and it doesn't help regenerate the cartilage in the knee. And so the newest one, obviously in science and in the news, there's this big argument, debate over stem cells, how they should be used, things like that. Well,
fetal tissue is oftentimes where it comes from.
Correct. It comes from fetal tissue, but stem cells, true stem cell tissue, would be tissue that I harvest from the patient, send it to a lab, grow it, and then re-inject it into the patient. And that right now is really cutting edge and not covered by insurance, and is really, there's a lot of more investigation that needs to go into that before that becomes something that's done mainstream. But the closest thing to that is using some of these pluripotent cells that are in immature cellular fluid, and the best source of that is amniotic fluid from the placenta. So for those that don't know, amniotic fluid is a fluid that bathes a baby while it's still in the mother's womb. And that amniotic fluid has a high concentration of different anti-inflammatory cells. To not get too technical, there's a lot of really good regenerative and anti-inflammatory cells in that amniotic fluid. So that fluid can be harvested and then processed and sterilized by a pharmaceutical company under FDA regulations and shipped to me to be used in patients with knee pain, shoulder pain, hip pain. And it's now covered by Medicare, which has been a great thing. And I was just telling you this morning, I did 7 of them this morning. I told the patients that I was injecting them. I said, well, I'm going to be on the talk show this morning with JW Simmons. And they were like, oh, okay, great. Tell them I had it. But anyway, so we did 7 this morning. We did 11 last week. And before that, so we've done about probably 30 of these now. And I've been amazed. I've yet to have one patient say that it didn't help them. And every patient has said that they thought it worked better than cortisone injections. So I think that's a good thing. So patients that are on Medicare that have knee pain, I think that's a great non-surgical option for them. I hope that commercial insurance companies will follow Medicare and start covering it too, so we can use it in a broader population of patients. Right now, the medication is just so expensive; it's kind of cost prohibitive if it's not covered by your insurance company.
Wouldn't that be a key factor as the cost-benefit analysis of utilizing that rather than going in for a replacement?
Sure.
Because obviously, the replacement
much more expensive.
It's going to cost tremendous amounts.
This is a fraction. This is a fraction, probably a 15th of the cost of joint replacement, and that's one reason why Medicare is covering it, and hopefully, it's going to prevent the need for knee replacement in a lot of patients. We'll see. I mean, the data is still, I'd like to see the long-term studies on this, but it's been around for a long time. In the past, it's just been bought out of pocket by professional athletes, the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, the LeBron James, Michael Jordans of the world. They'll pay for these things in the off season out of their own pocket, but fortunately now it's covered by Medicare. So
this placenta cell movement, are there other possibilities that placenta cells can be used in?
Yes.
Other than just joint kinds of injections?
For things like ACL reconstructions, wrapping the graft in the placental tissue, for things like rotator cuff repairs, using rather than just completely sewing up a hole in a rotator cuff, actually patching it. Anytime you have a hole in something, you sew it up, you're drawing up the size of it.
Right, so which limits its movement.
Yeah, so if you've got a hole over your knee and you just bring the edges together and sew it together, you've shortened your pants.
Right.
I've given you some high waters in, right?
Exactly.
But if you can patch it like Mom used to do.
Absolutely.
But you just can't patch your shoulder with fabric. But the fabric you can use is this placental amniotic tissue. And so there's it's not approved right now, but there's a lot of research being done on using that type of immature tissue to help heal problems like rotator cuff tears.
And I think the interesting thing is that's a living cell that actually regenerates within the body.
Correct.
So I want to segue, so we'll have time to get into everything I want to try to get to before the end of the show. This whole new world of AI, alternative intelligence, and robotics and all this kind of thing.
Right.
And when I think about joints and replacements and all the other stuff, is that something that's going to be extremely not only innovative but surprising to a lot of us, the applications of that for orthopedic surgery?
It will. When you combine, to keep it simple, when you combine things like GPS technology, global positioning satellite technology, so that if we put data points in, like where is this armchair, where is this arm on the chair, where is this arm on the chair, how far apart are they, how far are they off the ground, global positioning satellites can measure that. And then if you have a robot that can put a chair right beside it with an arm in the exact same place and the other arm in the exact same place, exactly the same height off the chair, that's how we're using robots in medicine. They're used in orthopedic surgery. There's a lot of robots that are around in the market. I've been involved with the use of some of those, and I haven't been sold on the fact that I'm ready to trust that robot with the knife to make that cut. If you think about it, when you're doing a knee replacement, for instance, there's kind of two thoughts. There's the artistic and sculpture side of things, and there's the engineering side of things. And so there's two thought processes. I like to think of myself as an artist and a sculptor and a builder. And so I feel, I look, I use the senses and the skills that God gave me to help perform that. And although the engineering side is a nice measurement to use calipers to measure how cuts are made and sizing and things like that, I'm not yet at the point, I don't think orthopedic surgery in general is where you're going to turn it over to a robot to perform these complex surgeries. I think it still takes thought process, touch, feel,
hands-on, and the visuality of it.
I do.
And kind of understanding.
And the science is bearing that out right now, that mistakes are made with relying completely on the robotic surgery. And the robot needs to be an extension of the surgeon's hand, the surgeon's skill, and not a replacement for the surgeon.
And particularly with what you do, I mean, we've seen that done a lot with valve replacements and all this kind of thing. But still, there's that guidance with the physician's hand, with the surgeon's hand, to be able to guide it.
And experience. I mean, there's something to be said for experience and being there to see it, feel it, and touch it, things like that. And I think that won't ever be replaced by a robot.
Something I want to try to get this in.
But they are an adjunct to it, though.
And one of the things that I recall you saying in the past when I've had you on is that if you get to a point it's something that you hadn't done or you're not that familiar with, you're going to ship the patient somewhere else.
If I don't do it every week, I'll send it to one of my friends. I've developed a great relationship with doctors all over. Well, I would say from Raleigh to Wilmington and everywhere in between, including Duke and Chapel Hill. I've got friends at all those places, and I've just gotten to the point in my career where the things that I do every day, I believe I do really, really well and better than anyone else. And the things that I don't do every day, I'm going to find you someone who does. So.
Wow. Well, and I think that should be reassuring for patients because you're not going to get into something you don't have the experience, that you're not going to do them the best job.
In a town like Clinton, people hear about good outcomes, they hear about bad outcomes. And not everyone can have a wonderful outcome, but I think patients understand that if you listen to them and you're trying to help them, I think that goes a long way.
And it's a team effort.
Reputation is very important to me. So I really believe that if I can't do the best job that I can do for you, if I think you can get a better job somewhere else, I'm going to get you to that person. It's more rewarding to me to have you have a good outcome regardless of where it's done.
Absolutely. So. Well, Dr. Huff, we're coming up on our last segment. We're going to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. We're coming up on our last segment. There's a lot of stuff we need to talk about, and granted, we won't get into everything with Dr. Huff today. Hopefully, we can get him back. Stay tuned, caller friend. We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Alex Huff.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. I also want to remind you this show is aired on Tuesdays, every Tuesday at 2:30. It's simulcast on WCLN Radio, Star Communications Channel 16. We encourage you to send us your comments. Please continue to send suggestions about shows that we need to do in the future. Comment on shows we've had. Easy to reach us. We should know edu@gmail.com. We should know edu@gmail.com. For many of our viewers that are longtime fans of the show, you realize we do this as an information, education show. It is for many networks, it would be extremely content heavy. We like to talk to our guests for as long a time as we can to get information that we can understand, analyze, and process. And certainly your input and commentary is very important. As I said in the beginning, I am JW Simmons, your host. We Should Know has now been on the air for quite a bit, I think about 7 months. 10 years, 7 months. So we've been doing this for some time. Dr. Alex Huff is with us today. Dr. Huff, you've been a long-time supporter of this show, and we certainly appreciate that. 1998, it just doesn't seem like that long ago, but it's been quite a few years. You landed in Clinton.
Right.
Your practice has exploded. You got people coming from multiple counties,
right.
From even more populated areas come to Clinton
right.
I guess, for part of the serenity and the quality of care they get. I want to touch on a couple of things that we really didn't get into in the past. We've always talked about sports issues. Pandemic kind of shut sports down for a long time.
Right.
Now we're seeing sports back in play. You've been an avid supporter of our public schools, being out there, literally out there with the teams, sometimes on the sidelines. Some of your folks are there doing assessments and that kind of thing. What do you want to say about that? Are you still engaged with that? Are you still keeping us moving and keeping our teams playing on our athletics fields?
Yes, we are. I really enjoy that. I think working with the kids is one of the highlights of my work week. Just in the last week, I've gotten phone calls from athletic directors at some of the middle schools and some of the high schools. We're setting up it's time to get the physicals done. Everyone's got to have a pre-participation physical before the coming season. Of course, the season's got kind of shifted around a little bit and shortened this year. And I don't think kids had as much time to train. And so I think that led to maybe an increase in some of the injuries. I think I've seen more overuse injuries where people are just jumping right into the season. But we're involved with it as we always are, always happy to do it. We're taking staff next week, I think, down to Union Middle and taking care of their high school physicals. But we've got a lot of the schools coming up on the schedule.
That's the kind of thing I think a lot of folks, they see you, either in your surgical gear or you're examining them in your office or you're at the hospital, but they don't see the external stuff sometimes.
Right.
And that's very important for folks to understand that that's part of what local small communities can do.
Sure. We can take, for instance, the high schools will call us and they'll say we need, we got 100 kids that need to get a physical, and we'll go out there. I'll take a big staff. I'll take 8 or 10 people if we need to knock those out really quickly, so there's no waits and things like that. But it's good. Otherwise, these kids would have to go to a physician's office, their primary care office, or one of the clinics here in the county and get their high school participation physical done. So I think it's a good service for them. And hopefully we're making relationships, too, with these people.
What do you say to folks that maybe are like me, give or take 10 or 15 years, and all of a sudden every year you probably see some of those folks in the spring of the year, they get out and they decide to do a 10-mile bike ride, or they decide, well, we're going to set out some new azaleas, or we're going to plant a tree, and all of a sudden something starts aching or something starts hurting. At what point in time should they come to see you? How long should they give that with medication, cream, and vibration before they come to see you?
Exactly. If they try their ibuprofen and their Tylenol, maybe some ice and things like that, and things they're not making progress in a week or so, either contact your family physician or call us directly. We'll be glad to see you. There's a lot of things we can do, as I alluded to earlier, that are non-surgical that are very helpful. And I've been amazed at how many people have been hurting for months and months and months, especially during the pandemic. And we'll get the opportunity to see them and treat them. And within 1 or 2 visits over a 3-week span of time, we can relieve their pain. And that's very rewarding when people come back in and want to shake your hand or give you a hug because they're able to do the things they enjoy doing, like gardening or golfing or biking or jogging.
A lot of new innovations, I'm told, in the area of arthritis and treatment of arthritis. What's happening in that area?
Arthritis is a very complex topic because there is the autoimmune component of arthritis, and that's the crippling arthritis that is treated with all of these new disease-modulating drugs that you see on television. And that's a discussion for you and your primary care physician, or you and myself if you suffer from one of those. Osteoarthritis is what is much more common and is what you're thinking about most likely, the wear and tear arthritis on your joints. And treatments include different medications, the newer medications that are safer for your stomach, safer for your kidneys, but then the injections that we alluded to earlier, the cortisone injections, the hyaluronate injections, and the amniotic fluid injections are all excellent non-surgical options for arthritic pain.
Are they working equally as well for arthritis as they are for other kinds of
Yes.
joint things?
I would say probably the primary use for those medications is osteoarthritis of the knees or shoulders.
Innovation is the key word there.
Absolutely.
So I want to get your opinion. I've tried to allow enough time to talk about this. all of us have pretty much, our listeners and viewers have pretty much heard about this new Apple building project, a new hub on the East Coast. We're talking initial 3,000 jobs, $1 billion investment.
Yes.
The ripple effect has been discussed as relates to traffic, restaurants, food service, transportation. What kind of effect and impact is that going to have on medicine?
I think this is absolutely awesome for our state. And I think that the people that it brings, the quality of jobs that it brings, the boom for our economy, and the trickle down to housing and like you said, with the roads and infrastructure stuff, I think it's going to be great. In terms of what Apple does for medicine, you reach in your pocket and pull out your phone. So many of the things, I don't have a beeper anymore because it's all on my iPhone now. I don't have the need for a laptop with me all the time now because the phones are so much more powerful. I can access my electronic health record. I can access your health record and see what medications you're on, what surgeries you've had, what consultations you've had. I can do all of that via the internet on my Apple device, which is great. So I think it's going to be a wonderful boon for our economy. Technology, Austin, we already know is a technology hub. When I think of technology, I think of Silicon Valley, RTP, and Austin, Texas. And this will just improve RTP's standing among those areas. And like I said, it's going to bring more jobs, higher paying jobs, and it's going to hopefully influence some of the kids that are in middle school right now to get into technical careers and seek higher technical education through university system. And they can plug right into it. So I think it's going to be wonderful for everyone. I personally think that, if you drive to Raleigh now from Newton Grove, after you get past the intersection with 95, it all becomes Raleigh, basically. I remember when exit 312 had nothing but a gas station. Now it's got everything. Absolutely. And then 319 blew up, and it's not going to be long before 341 and 343 are going to blow up right here in our back door. And as people look for affordable housing and space, with things like a pandemic, everyone wants a little space now,
I think if I was a developer, I would be looking at maybe 2 or 3 golf courses in the northern part of Sampson County around the I-40 intersect up there.
I'm telling you, I've always said it, but if you look at a map of the United States, if you find where 2 interstates intersect, there's always a major city there, just without fail, all over the country. But I-40 and I-95 still does not have a major city. I mean, it's Benson,
Yeah, I'm surprised at that.
So that area is going to blow up, I believe.
Yeah, I think in the next 10 to 20 years, that's going to be the gold area. It's kind of the gold crossroads, if you will.
Exactly.
And a part of it, I think, is the land development issue in talking with a number of folks. And of course, our industrial developer here, Stephen Barrington, is doing a great job in trying to analyze and look at analytics on that. But for medicine and what Triangle is bringing is a lot of folks, I think, just looking that land area now, as we mentioned earlier, and it's going to bring people more toward practices like yours in rural areas.
Sure. So I think it's going to be a great thing.
So I'll give you a few seconds here before we have to close. I want to make sure we cover things that you wanted to touch on.
Sure.
So I'll give you about 30 to 60 seconds.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to get out there was to let the people of Sampson County know, certainly I've been blessed and privileged to take care of you, and it's been a blessing to me and my family. Some of the things that we're doing to stay on the top of orthopedics so that I feel like we're delivering the best we can in the hospital that we have. We're offering the joint camp. That's going to be a great educational seminar for people that are considering joint replacement. That is going to lead to shorter hospital stays, in fact, outpatient stays. We're doing assessments in the office as mandated by the government, but we're doing these safe balance assessments in the office to assess your fall risk and help reduce your risk of falling and breaking the hip, maintaining your independence as long as possible. And we're utilizing all of the innovative things that are available in the Triangle and other places. You'll hear the radio commercials for clinics that will give you injections for pain and injections for arthritis. We do the exact same things here in Clinton. And so that's just a great thing that you don't have to drive there. You can if you want to, if you choose to, but if you choose to stay home, we're here and available for you. Be glad to take care of you.
And I think the encouraging thing is that they have access to that here. And even, as you pointed out a while ago, as we move forward with technology, you'll be able to treat folks even that they don't even have to leave home. You can do FaceTime with them. You can either with a computer or, again, that phone, whether it's Apple, Android, or whatever, that phone, you can actually look at them and talk to them.
Yes, we've got patients now that are using the home cycle that we have the Wi-Fi connectivity to. We've used FaceTime, and we have the ability through our health record to do these virtual visits if we need to.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us. I want to thank you for taking time sitting down. I know you've got a busy schedule, so we're going to get you out of here so you can see patients. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. Dr. Alex Huff has been our guest, and we encourage you to call Dr. Huff if you have an issue. We look forward to seeing you again next week right here, and as always, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host JW Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.